Decatur.
I remember wearing the last.
Decatur, Illinois.
Okay.
But my parents live in Mary, so I get to stay there tonight.
Maybe the first.
Okay, guys, we are live.
Are we live?
Yes.
We waited an appropriate amount of time.
30 seconds.
Okay, we just went live with our YouTube feed, and I want to welcome you to a special call session of the Calvert City Council. The special call purpose of this meeting is to look at the strategic goal setting for finalization of the strategic plan, and this is a very important part of the life of the community as we move forward and set our budgets and emphasize what we're going to work on. So this workshop, and I want to turn it over to our consultant, Stephanie Brown. So we've been in the chambers doing a little bit of pre-work, working with some of the already identified initiatives and going through an exercise to rank them as the members in here see fit. And this augments some other information we already have gathered through surveys. So with that, I've probably already said too much, and I'll sit down and turn it over to Stephanie.
Is everybody okay if I take off my mask? I'm fully vaccinated.
Thank
Exercise with caution, but if you're not comfortable, I'm happy to wear, but my you to hear me. So you did a very good synopsis. Yes, these goals, if you remember back in October, we had a very special Zoom session where we went through each of these, reflected on the previous strategic plan, crossed out some that were no longer applicable because either you A, completed them, so you got to pat yourselves on the back, or B, times have changed and they just don't matter anymore. Added some new ones. I know you all went through and did the exercise to help set some priorities. So what we want to do tonight is look through it because what this does do is set the tone for how you want to expend dollars and expend staff energy and time and effort over the next 5 to 7 years. You know, some of these things will be low-hanging fruit that city staff and you can maybe accomplish in the next year. So that's great. Let's identify those as the short-term goals. But we'll also want to look at some of the things that, we know are going to take a couple years. It's going to take a little bit to get funding behind it, either to raise the money, go after grants, or to just, save pennies and say, okay, after 4 years of setting some reserve funds back, we're now ready to implement. So that's pretty much what we want to do here is basically create a roadmap for the community over the next 5 to 7 years. So are there any questions? Did anybody not get to put up their stars on their favorite projects? Did anybody put up more than 10 stars?
Probably.
So the reason we did 10 was just to try to help focus and see if there was some overlap. That's not to say that these other goals aren't important, but this at least gave us a focus for conversation tonight. By not having a star doesn't mean it's not going to go in the plan. It just means that maybe it gets a lower priority as far as when dollars come available. If there are 10 stars by this one and 1 by this one, clearly this one has a little more meaning. So is everybody still able to hear me? I know I have a loud voice, but I don't feel like it is. So I just have to check. All right, so starting at the top here, Calvert City as a recreational trail hub. So the two that seem to have surfaced up here is to create a trail connection to Paducah and the Tennessee River, as well as connect a multi-use trail from 5th to 62. Well, seems like that's a pretty good one, but overall, I mean, there are pretty much stars on every one, just saying that trails are important. I think you already having a trail plan is important to that. Would anybody like to add maybe a timeline to try to get a multi-use trail or a trail connection to Paducah in the river? Like, is that we think? Sorry.
I can kick it off, I
Sure.
guess. I was a little surprised that I guess I was the only one who put connect us to the Grand River trails, which seems more achievable than say Paducah. And I don't know, that surprised me. I thought that one was
It's
gonna
marked on
jump
my
out.
rough draft. It makes it
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the 5th to 62, do we not already have that?
Yeah.
Via the,
And
I think it's talking
Long
about either
Valley.
Oak Park or 95. That's what we were talking about.
Oh, do I have that one marked wrong?
no,
No, it's not. It's just that we have one,
via Lone Valley Road.
right? But I think when we were having the meetings, what people were wanting was to have that either out 95 or Oak Park, to have one that was right in town going out to 62. Of course, the part of that would be, but it's not just you're connecting with 62, you're connecting 62 with Fifth Avenue so that people who live in these subdivisions could ride their golf cart or whatever in the town. And right now they can't because that was what I got when we were having the meetings.
Yeah.
And the only thing I had Grand Rivers, not that access, the only thing that made me not rate it any higher than I did is that you have so much government things when you're crossing the dam and things like that, that I wondered how, even though I think that would be a wonderful thing, how feasible that would be. And that's the only consideration that I had on that.
If I could add something, there actually is already a plan with TVA they're building a bridge with the new lock and dam, and it includes a pedestrian bridge. So that is actually taken care of on our side.
That was my answer to you, Jeremy. I guess I did put one on 5th and 10th, or to connect 5th to 62. The Grand River one in my mind is a foregone conclusion.
Okay, good.
And I could be
Yeah,
jumping
and
the
I
gun
sort
there.
of, yeah.
Because I feel like that fits more of our identity right now.
I do.
And when you say Grand Rivers, what it really means LBL also. You get that
Yeah.
into that's
Hey, Blair,
Katie's, yeah.
is there a plan to get across the canal bridge into LBL that you've seen somewhere?
There isn't. I did speak with Jared from Land Between the Lakes, and he suggested a pedestrian bridge that would run alongside that bridge, and he actually sounded pretty excited. Now they are not in a great funding situation at all, so it would have to come from a grant or Grand Rivers of some sorts to be able to do that. But he seemed to think it would be feasible if we found the funds.
You know, as far as connecting to Paducah, I mean, we can expend funds in the city limits, and for very few cases outside, if we enter into some agreements or whatever. But you know, our action on trying to get with Paducah or the River Line is going to be one more of a promotional catalyst, if you will, to find grant funds from people from those sources that could fund such a trail. Yeah, and that's, you know, that's something that's really not in the scope of us expending budgetary monies immediately. Yeah. As far as, you know, construction funds, I mean, maybe we could put in some funds to help power some studies or whatever. But that's going to be contingent. Our barrister is going to make us identify why it is that we're spending city tax money on such an endeavor.
well, yeah, in coordination with Marshall County, McCracken County, and the city so far. That seems like a pretty lofty goal. And what would that even look like? Run along 62, weave in and out of places.
Well, I can get you to CFI, almost to CFI with that 7 foot on 62.
Yeah.
Through the back door.
That's what I was supposed to say, yeah, the back one.
But you know, we're a member of Trail Towns, Tennessee Trail Towns. So is Paducah. So that fixes sort of an alliance there that we're going. And that's really why I'm marked it personally, is that the Grand River thing is to me is a foregone conclusion. I have it ranked getting the LBL off our trail system. That's higher than Paducah, but us being hooked up in the Tennessee Trail Town, what is it that we're actually going to dig? You know, when we actually could get bike trails marked fairway toward the county line if we go out through I-1 area, out through that way. And I don't, did I answer? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of, I think.
And one of the things too, to me, it's a separate line here, but I think it could easily be incorporated into either one of the 10s that we had, and that's incorporate Old Calvert into the trail system. You know, we just sort of leave that hanging sometimes, but if you were to do, say, from 95 to 62, you would be getting some of Old Calvert. If you did a trail from, you know, Calvert to Paducah, then you could maybe come through there and get part of what we consider Old Calvert.
Yeah. So you think that 95, would that turn 95 into a 3-lane. We ride on easements. Cause I mean,
Oh,
you're up in some people's yards
Yes,
pretty
it-
quick along 95.
I would prefer it on Oak Park, but I'm just saying, you know, get them into town as far as those two. I don't know whether it would be feasible or not. It would just be nice to have those areas connected where you could do the golf carts in the town and Old Calvert too.
Well, I mean, if you were to have residents interested in riding to their work areas, you're gonna have to tie in Oak Park up the 62 corridor, back down Main Street, and even on out in the industrial complex. If you were gonna be serious about people able to access workplaces by alternate transportation. You know, if we were gonna say, okay, our grants are because alternative transportation grants, and we say we're gonna make Couch City a biking friendly area. You're not gonna ride down Highway 95 at shift change
No,
to report to an office job or to, 7 o'clock AM, 7 o'clock PM are out, as is from 3 probably till 5. You won't catch me
right,
there, and I would say something bad about catching you dead, because you might be.
right.
But, you have to get serious, and you have to build something to get the bicyclists out of the main road. And that's a pretty big, tall order to build an internal trail system to make you truly a commuter, as opposed to just a sport, if you will.
Right.
That's where a lot of the safety, there's some things in here about implementing the safety, because drivers still don't know what to do with the pedestrian, even when they're at the 4-way.
It's an educational component as well.
I feel like we need something. I mean, I've even stopped my car, like, probably could have gotten easily been yelled at by my husband, stopped the traffic on the other side so the bikers could go through.
Yeah,
On Fifth Avenue.
there's people are tentative on both ends. I've seen up here, people at shift change think that it doesn't matter what.
They're ready to go
pedestrians
home
do
or
at shift change.
yeah.
And I've seen some scared to come across because there's.
Really, it's a state highway, but they could lower the speed limit on Oak Park. It would, and I drive as fast as anybody, that would help, coming in that way.
No, I'm good. I'm good with that.
So with the Tennessee Trail Towns, is there funding behind that? Or is it just more of a networking? Be a
Just to
part of
make a correction on that, it's a Tennessee river town.
Tennessee River Town. Thank you.
Who said trail?
With the Tennessee River Town, is there funding behind that? Or is it more just to be a part of a network and
Blair would really have to, Blair,
It's just to being a part of the network. There's no funding. They do have kayaks that we have, able to get a hold of, but yeah, as far as funding, no.
okay, that's just, they'd be a good champion then, not a good.
Absolutely.
So that's where I was trying to decide where to put them. I heard a lot, and I've heard a lot in the past about golf carts. Is there something we need to do for golf cart access? Or are we comfortable with bikes and golf carts being
they work well so
together?
far, haven't they?
I just-
Or not,
some-
I mean, on the trails,
There's a difference in a sidewalk and a multi-use path.
There is
yeah, I'm talking about multi-use.
multi-use path like this. Okay.
Well, I mean, just like all vehicles don't operate on the road,
Right.
not all golf carts operate. I mean, we let them run around in the park too, and it's almost like we need to put cart path only are allowed in the park. There's people who play disc golf with a golf cart.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And so we made tracks in wet conditions in our parks area, but you can't fix that. I mean, so yeah, I think it's overall going through. We haven't had any, I don't think we've had any incidents where folks that I'm aware of, we've run over people.
The only reason I also asked that is I know some funding sources are, if it's motorized, it's not allowed if you
Right.
want
Mhm.
funding for this trail, non-motorized vehicles only.
Mhm.
So I just, something to consider.
Right.
I'm not sure all funding sources are like that, but I do know there are many that are like, if it's a bike trail, only feet or non-motorized fields. And that's where you can use our money. So that just something to consider too, as we start identifying funding sources where
Good point.
what
Good point.
use you want.
And we've
on
been
that
through
trail.
some of that, and I have to honestly tell you, I don't know where we are on every trail that we have.
Mhm.
So, you know, this council decided the ones the city was gonna fund in order to allow carts to go to
Okay.
certain places, so we made it part of our consideration.
Great. Just, this,
There's
we're
strings
playing things out. If
The
we're
ones that
approving
hit the state line, the state park line, they can't have a golf cart.
non-motorized, yeah. That's where most state fundings, I think, is where that also comes, so that all ties together. Okay. Any other thoughts on connecting Calvert City to the lakes, river, and neighboring communities? Anything we're omitting, missing? I think this is probably more slightly on the longer term, just because funding, you're not talking any small dollars when you're building trails or doing things of that nature, so. Okay. The next one under this one was grow relationship and perception of Kentucky Dam Village as a part of Calvert City. Most of these just got 1 star, so not a higher priority. So I think for now, if it's okay, we'll skip over this one to some that have more stars. And if we have time at the end, we can come back and discuss, or does anybody feel the burning need to discuss now? Okay. Then alternative transportation community. I think this plays into the recreational side. Develop and implement a pedestrian plan for Calvert City. Continue to develop the trail and sidewalk connections. This one got 3 stars. Ensure all neighborhoods are connected by sidewalks. Implement lighted crosswalks, possibly using lights, and add additional water fountains to new sections of trail and bike racks to each park. Add bike mechanic stand in each park. So that's ways to make it more pedestrian friendly, although some of those feel a little more up above with biking, but I think the intent is there to better crosswalks, better sidewalks.
Yeah, I feel like we're not too far away from connecting certain, pieces, just because remember, any city street 35 miles or below is allowed. So, I'm the whole connector subdivision, but if there was something like permanent, maybe along that. Well, yeah.
What would be?
I know you got to cross 95 one way, but I've even heard discussions of going all the way down to the cemetery and then coming across at, Denny's. So that would be a nice, easy little stick of property to properly connect to Princess Jennifer and Royal Park as that's growing.
Yeah.
That's my thoughts on that. But once you start talking about, you can cut across 95 at the water tower as well to go the back way to get to that other, 15th, 16th area. But
A long back way.
that's a long back way.
Certain hours of the day, I'm not going anywhere near that road.
I know. So, but where do you leave them on an island?
And I
up
don't
there?
want to
I know,
because
but you won't want to run up along 95 either. So,
I mean, if you did that, you'd have to have it off. I mean, you'd have to, like Gene said, or whoever said, you'd have to get some land and stuff. And all parts the same way. You don't have a real wide shoulder on either way,
I wonder if we couldn't get
But
some sort of light, like if you have a pedestrian, if you're walking, you hit the walk light and you wait for it. So if we have traffic lights there to maybe send them through.
yeah, maybe, but I was thinking about the plant traffic times.
Yeah.
That would be.
there's no perfect answer,
Yeah.
but are we good with those backways right now, or do we want like a path per se? I guess that's the question. To that point.
That, or I wouldn't be how much like a little bridge to go up over it, maybe way out of line,
Yeah. Nobody over there has said anything to me about them being inconvenienced.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yeah,
see them on
see,
the
I
golf
think
carts
they're
through
sick of
Calvert.
it.
I know
So-
my neighbor on Riley Circle rides his Ranger to pick the kids up at school.
It's a school.
So,
I actually have walked from my house to Lee Bailey's.
Yeah.
It's okay most of the way. There's some areas that could be made easier, but and I went around 10th and
yeah.
it's a good walk.
And I mean, if you're on a golf cart, it's no sweat. I mean, that's, you want that scenic, yes, but
I don't know, nobody over there has said that we need to focus on that, so I'm good if we move on.
It just feeds right into this next one. Implement the complete streets concept where feasible. For those who, Blair?
I didn't say anything.
Okay. So complete streets, for those that aren't aware or just need a refresher, it's the concept of all types of transportation in one corridor. Now you've got areas for walking, for biking, and for vehicular traffic. So it's not choosing one form of transportation mode over another. It's incorporating them all to be able to interact and traverse together. So some of the ideas too: traffic calming designs at strategic locations. I think that was just mentioned there for 95. Is there a way to reduce some speeds at critical points? That one got 2 stars. This one got 4 stars, especially, is that for musical instruments?
I really want some musical instruments.
I'll underline that one just to make sure I know that star associates with that one. So then some of the other ideas for complete streets, making them more user-friendly: trash cans along the multi-use trail, lights along the trail, emergency call stations, trail sweeper to keep it clean of debris, art and interactive equipment, including musical instruments, tree identification, art sculptures, historical information, exercise equipment, things that get people interacting. And then the last one didn't get any stars, but assess key streets for completeness and set objectives as appropriate. And I think the improving the conditions and the user experience along the trails and along the streets is definitely seems to be something that's a higher priority for you all.
I think that if we had stuff on the side of the sidewalks, your kids would find it more enjoyable to get out on the bikes. I mean, my husband and I don't have a problem with every day getting on our bike and going, but sometimes we have to kind of beg the kids to. I think that if they could get off along the way and, you know, play some musical instruments, and it doesn't matter how bad you play, those outdoor instruments sound beautiful.
They are, but the only thing you have to hear is the sound. I mean, you don't want somebody playing the instruments if you're going down the sidewalk in front of the housing.
Well, I was thinking that we would put them, they would go somewhere, if you don't want them all throughout all of Calvert, I would think that you would just put them in an area like maybe past Old Park, from that stretch down there. And
Now, those things tend to be grouped.
yes,
Yeah.
so you just put
I
them
think exercise, you know, so just hear the
the
exercise.
equipment, or and then like it says sculptures. If we had art sculptures out there, that would be something kind of cool to look at. And we do have a man here in Calvert that actually does make iron sculptures. That's pretty cool.
see, that one didn't trigger me because we're kind of spoiled in that our trail system, we've got different parks sprinkled all over
That
it.
is
So
true.
we don't have any big, long, desolate runs of path until you get out to like Lone Valley, and then, 62 to the dam is kind of barren.
Yeah, so or maybe musical instruments down there on that side.
But it's just a one straight line.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that would be a better location if it was on the other side of 62.
Yeah,
That would
because
be
it's
better.
just one straight line. Pretty once you get to the dam. It's hilly.
It is hilly.
It's hilly.
My bike has to get over there.
And there's some rest stations, right? I mean, they designed rest stations.
Yes.
And I also think like the emergency call stations and stuff, everybody usually got a cell phone, and that's,
I think sometimes those are also a perception of safety.
Mhm.
There's value in there too. Just to see those, I think there's a little bit more awareness. Okay.
The art sculptures are really nice, but sometimes the cost involved.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty.
One thing in central Illinois, I know that a lot of communities are doing is they now have an art, like almost like rental program where several communities go together and sculptors and artists contribute to this network. And these installations get moved from community to community, and you just kind of pay a fee as a city annually, so the artists get a
An
cut
art
of it.
subscription.
An art subscription, essentially. But you
I've
just,
seen.
all you have to do is provide like a space for the art installation. And then you get it for a couple years, and then after whatever the contract is up, then it goes to another community for them to enjoy. And so that way the artist gets recognition around, and your community also continuously is refreshing its look. So
I don't know this for a fact, but I could imagine where like Berg State may have a program where students would do something like
right, I mean, it's similar to the students art in the cafe concept. It's just a little, slightly larger scale and a little bit more regional scale. But you know, looking into some sort of network or finding someone who's maybe wanting to start that network in the area.
Yeah.
that.
All right, any other thoughts on complete streets? Okay, move on here. Develop a Calvert City art trail. So I think that feeds in, until these kind of all flowed as we were talking. So I think this one only got one star here, but I think it could play in as part and parcel with our previous discussion. This one got a lot of stars here. Number 2, Calvert City in Bloom. So the 3 key points under here: create a local version of a beautiful property award, looking at something like American Bloom or some of those other national programs, to become a pollinator city, or to implement a community garden or plot system. So those are 3 ideas to help green up and beautify, as well as, you know, be good for the community and Mother Nature. My husband and I just planted a couple acres of pollinators in our backyard, and after just a year, the amount of butterflies just like tripled in no time. It's phenomenal. So I personally highly recommend a pollinator patch, but that's just my own personal preference.
That's some of the things that, you know, we talked about, you know, along the way in the old park, and even the land that we have over in the corner of 6th and Cedar Street there that may use, but in the meantime, if they could plant it like with milkweed or something like that for the pollinators, you know, that would,
And
that's something that's very inexpensive. I mean, it's not.
And you don't have the maintenance costs
Right.
of mowing. I think there's also that when done right and it doesn't become a weed, it can have that beauty, have the added benefits of pollinators and infiltration for, you know, water and purifying that, but also then you don't have to mow it every 4 days. So,
Make sure you don't forget that idea. I love that on the retention pond.
Oh, yeah, I've actually said that 2 or 3 times.
Okay, well,
Seriously.
keep saying
Yeah.
it. 'Cause we're
And
hearing
wildflowers
on that.
I mean,
That's
we've
kind
got-
of a no-brainer.
Right, you know, I mean, we've got it there, and we need something if we're not, you know, if we don't have, decide we have the funds to move ahead with that project right now, that would be a perfect solution, you know, in the meantime, and then after it's done, that's still something that could be used, you know.
Spots that are not pond.
Right, yeah.
that's very low hanging fruit too. That's something that you can implement rather quickly. So we're gonna mark that one as short term.
And the community garden, the Presbyterian Church actually has a community garden that I would say the right where the higher up I was like, the Presbyterian higher ups gave them like a grant to do that. But what you run into, or what they ran into, and I think Meryl will back me up on this, is that the people who would come and get the vegetables and stuff didn't know how to cook them or how to preserve them and stuff. So it's sort of, if you do a garden, then you have to do a lot of other stuff there.
She
too.
hosted a lot of classes
She
as
did,
well.
that was,
We
yeah.
would have trees for people to come in, and so we could educate them. And it was a lot of fun, and the turnout would get bigger and bigger.
There's an extension. Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that makes sense.
And the community seemed to love it. Whenever it was growing, it was being picked up.
Good.
Nothing was wasted.
But I think it would be nice to have like some little plot, if we had a place, plots where somebody could, you know, get a plot, and if they, again, you gotta have a rototiller and stuff like
And
that to do.
it's a lot of work. I mean, me and my kids would get out there and we sweat to death and it was all voluntary, but I mean, it's a lot of work.
I remember
But
when I was in
definitely on
high
the
school, my
list.
mom used to wake me up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays to go in the garden, and I was like, why? Beat the heat that way.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and with those garden plots too, I also know there may be opportunities with local hospitals and care facilities. I know of one where they give prescriptions for fresh fruits and vegetables. So they work with a community garden. So part of your, like, if you have, say, diabetes or some of the conditions you're fighting, they prescribe vegetables from the gardens that they have as a part of their hospital system. So, and with recipes and heart healthy things, or if you're obese or any of that nature, that's part of your prescription with your medication. And so it's part and parcel with the healthcare system. So that could be another avenue to chase, you know, for a community garden, because there are health benefits to that as well. I'll put them down as a potential champion.
Won't last long.
Anything else about Calvert City and Bloom? Okay.
One little thing, if we did do some version of the beautiful property award, like in ours, if there was some way to do one most improved property or something like that, that would give them
An incentive to get out there
incentive
and
to
do
do
that.
that, and maybe, you know, maybe a prize or a grant if they did it. I mean,
Well, there could be subcategories of
Yeah.
awards too.
And we
Yeah.
have a lot of people asking for that. There are some people that work so hard on their yard, they want to be recognized.
And this has been on my board, and sorry to interrupt, but I will say that CADA has talked about doing the Yard of the Month. I know Tanera has brought it up to me several months ago, so that is kind of in the planning.
Right, awesome.
Great. All right. Anything else? Number 3, the goal of improving condition of properties throughout Calvert City. Many stars next to cleanup of abandoned or derelict properties.
Let's clean it up. Let's do it.
That's,
I want that one to be at the highest of my priority list.
those are all 5-year stars.
on that one, we need to figure out some way to get it done faster. The process is just, up to now, it went this way too long. I mean, it shouldn't.
You know, that's a big thing we've talked about with times in council. You know, when you do that, you invoke a lot of due process that has to be done. It's an arduous task. It's a time-consuming task. And we pour, as a city, we pour a lot of volunteer man hours, professional man hours into developing our zoning, planning, the committees that stand on it. And it should be more of a positive. But I think that derelict properties or signs around these communities that all of us as council members, and I'll speak for me as a former council member, I'd get notices several times per month about what can we do about this one or that one. But there is due process before you can really do much about that. So that's something I'm not at all surprised that we got high marks up in this chamber. And I would think that most of our citizens would.
So how do we move forward with that? Do we just need to have a workshop for that alone, just to see what the due process is? And
I mean, I think the last time we talked about it, gossiply, was that abandoned is easy to spot, but some people's derelict is not their definition of derelict. They're doing their best.
yes,
You know, so
that's when volunteers, I can see how that could come in.
You know,
sometimes you'll never make people care about the look of their property. And how much teeth do we have to go after
Well, I mean, one of the things that, you know, since this is gonna be in the strategic plan, as part of the strategic plan, it supports the idea that us and other stakeholders in government and in the community itself, you know, think it's important. So let's figure out, you know, how to allocate a higher level of attention to that. There's been a few things we've talked about. I don't know if we really need to get into that right now. You know, but budget process is coming up. And so there's some things that it takes money and time to attack those things. And when you put money toward that, you're not gonna have money available for other stuff, but being on the strategic plan helps us make those decisions.
One thing you might want to consider too is what are maybe the carrot stick method. Like, okay, maybe the whole reason is I just don't have the funds to paint my house. Like, that's it. So maybe there are some, we can find, you know, in your research, what are the top 3 issues for these derelict houses? Is it broken windows? Is it trash in the yard? Is, you know, like what is making them derelict? And then what incentives can we offer for people to apply for grant funding or low interest loans, maybe like some sort of revolving loan fund through the city, something that provides that incentive for them too. Like you said, some people just don't care, and that you can wave as many carrots in front of their nose and they're gonna go. But it might help some.
But I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's something I'd like to do.
Yeah.
And some just don't have the funding or the how-to.
Well, I
Not
think
everybody can just go to Lowe's.
I think one of the reasons we bring it so high, we got several layers above that layer. We got some layers just more or less abandoned.
Right.
And that's
that need
easy
to
to
be
spot.
addressed. That we need to get on. That's probably the screamers. And then we get down to the levels that we're talking about here. Folks who want away and can't get away. What can you do to facilitate that? But I think we got a few layers before we get.
Right.
That exists now. We probably ought to do something to help out folks. But we've got some screamers out there. We've got pictures on our phones that people have sent us.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, and I think just the whole that when they are breaking an ordinance that we have, that we need to have some teeth to the enforcement of it. When, you know, when you have I'm not gonna go into specifics now, but
Right.
when you have a business that you know is not supposed to be in a certain location, that could be a danger to the community, that you don't have to go through several months before you get something done about it. You know, that there's some way to streamline the enforcement.
No, some of it's skill set, some of it's knowledge.
Mhm.
And I've done this before. This will work for me before. And you know, you have the phone number to call, if you will, and it takes a few minutes to get that. And you know, it's got to be part of somebody's focus on every day.
Right.
You know, we've got to, in some places we have some violations of zoning that are because of financial reasons, because of duress. And how do we get those folks some help that get, you know, better their situation?
And that goes back to what she was saying, to find out, you know, to look a little deeper and find out why. And I think that's a great idea.
One of the recurring things that was in our 2014 strategic plan and also in 2017 study, then I think even this survey over and over again is the condition of the existing housing stock, which might include a lot of this. And as Gene says, there's a lot of different layers, but do we really know how successful how other communities have been successful at attacking sort of that big problem that is in layers? And maybe we should just look at doing that.
No, we've got the community sirens going on, I think.
Actually, I got some.
Maybe you're in a living room. That ours? Hey, John Ward?
I haven't got the code ready.
Ironically
He might
enough,
be
this
on
is
mute.
not the first time this has happened to me in a meeting like this.
Severe thunderstorm warning.
Is it in our area? Is it just in the county?
It's in our area,
But one of
but
the,
not for long, Jane.
one of the things too, we have a lot of Ralph was sort of getting in that area, that we have a lot of rental property here. It might be something that we need to look into, some guidelines for rental.
Where did
So
I-
that's in that code.
Yeah.
Address housing needs,
Okay,
there's a
okay,
whole
okay.
section on that.
Did I see somewhere that said we had 70% rental in Calvert?
Yeah, I read that.
That was the survey, so that wasn't
That was
7%,
just a
that was
survey.
of
Of the
those who took the
responders.
the survey,
Oh, okay.
7% were
Yeah.
renters.
Okay, because I was like, that seems low.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
Well, it was something I did want to point out because there were a lot of opinions about what needs to be done.
Yeah.
Or the quality and all that of the rental, and I was like, but
Right.
people who are not renters also are not responding, so I feel like there needed to be
yeah.
Okay.
some exploration of that too, because there's a slight
And I agree,
skewing
yes.
of the,
I was-
of the data there for that. So yeah, that, I did call that to your attention, that it's because only 7% identified as
As
renters in that survey.
So on one level, you got the stuff that Gene was talking about, abandoned places, and the city has taken, well, taken may not be the right word, but taken the initiative to have that kind of property raised in some cases at city expense, and then a lien will be filed on it. And we may sit on it, that lien for years before somebody finally sells, and then we may collect our costs and our back taxes at that point. And then way down, at a totally different level, you've got houses that may need a storm door. Maybe it's some older person living there that doesn't have at least the ability to do that, and maybe not the resources. I was a member of a real informal, really unskilled group of people through our church that went around and did some things. You may be aware of that. Scott headed it up, and we addressed maybe 8 or 10 places. But
I've tried to beat this drum over the years about a housing incentive thing, like how do you, more of the angle of how do you get young people to come and buy one of these starter homes and fix it up?
Right.
Because people love to do that right now. It's kind of trendy.
Yeah.
But Greg has, I'm not gonna say stifled me, but Greg has brought me down to earth on what we can give people money for.
Yeah.
But you do have other cities that do similar things,
Yeah.
and we probably need to maybe look at it,
Yeah.
look at a little deeper to
We-
see if
we
there's somewhere around that Greg might see a different view of it.
We need to find our Kentucky version of Chippy Joanna Gaines and that take care of all that.
Well, it's like we could buy a bunch of these dilapidated properties and sell them to people at a lower cost if they agree to do certain things. with
Right.
it. Or, if it's under the guise of economic development, we can give people money, but we can't just say, you need a new fence, here's whatever.
Now, and did you talk to Greg about that?
Yeah.
Is this it?
I'm here, guys. I'm here. Sorry, I had to go. I had to go up and get my pot pie out of the oven, but I'm back. What was that? I heard you talking about me, Jeremy. What did you just say?
So just our discussions over the years about how we are allowed to spend money when it comes to housing and what we can and can't do for residents and.
Right. Yeah, there are things that we can do, and we can provide for some residential development in the name of economic development. But when we do so, when we spend money for instance, economic development, and it is, I always go to the Fountain Avenue project sort of as the example.
Yeah.
But we can, for instance, contract with or give contractors the opportunity to we could give a contractor a lot to build on, for instance, so long as the contractor agreed to build a house of X quality, of X size, with certain amenities, the things that, whatever it is that we have decided is important to our economic welfare and growth. But we would have to let anybody bid on that. We have to figure out a way to do that. Every situation is different, but we can spend money for economic development, and in doing that, we can give away property for economic development. But you have to be careful as to how you do it. You can't just give somebody a lot that says, yeah, I'll build a house on that. They have to build it a certain size, and they can't charge more than X for it, and all of those kinds of things.
I don't necessarily want to build, but what about purchasing these abandoned homes and fixing them up?
Yeah, I mean, the city can purchase. When you're saying abandoned homes, are you talking about the dilapidated homes that we've abolished, or are you just talking about some other?
Some homes in Calvert that have been sitting empty for, years. Can we contact that owner, make an offer, buy the house, fix it up, and sell it? As a city?
Probably not just that simply, but yes.
Okay.
Lexington and Owensboro both have some ideas of some things that they have done. I've got an email back from an article on Lexington for a couple of years ago. And Lynn always said something about, we'd go and take a trip and talk to them and discuss it. We just never did. So that might be something to do and see how they went about it. And, and
Buying up a bunch of properties and like having a city portfolio of, hey, here's our menu of incentivized lots or properties that, we could do that, but you're talking about, you're gonna bite off some money.
yeah,
It's a lot to manage.
I'm thinking this is not necessarily they bought property. I think that it was maybe some loans, incentives or something like that they were given. And I'll go back and look at stuff, but that's what.
Greg, could we give people dirt cheap loans?
I've never been asked that question, and I've never seen it done. I can't think of a statute that addresses it.
Okay.
It seems a little uncomfortably close to lending our credit to. A city can't lend its credit. That's that's the constitutional rule. City can't lend its credit. And if you're loaning money, I don't know, an argument could be made.
Well,
There are things.
What if you? Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
What if you set aside a portion, like you said, okay, we're going to set aside $100,000, and this is the criteria for the grant, and this is who can apply for the grant, and then you take that funds, and whoever applies for that grant, the funds could be allocated for those projects, those specific projects. Like if you say whoever applies for the grant would get $5,000, and they can use it to remodel their kitchen, or I don't know, paint their house. But it has to be fall within those lines.
That I think it's going to have to be a little more clearly aimed at either dilapidated housing or revitalizing some otherwise economically handicapped area. Handing out small amounts like that, it's difficult to justify. Honestly, it's a lot easier to justify buying a lot and giving that lot or contributing that lot to an effort to create housing for the city than it is to give somebody $5,000 to upgrade their kitchen.
I think what we're wanting to do is not support contractors, that we're wanting to have it where we could help citizens already in place, or to, like Jeremy said, to bring new people in if they wanted to flip a house or something like that. Some kind of grant or incentive on that.
If we could,
like Fountain Avenue. I mean,
if we could specifically tie it to, a plan, start to say strategic plan. That's what we're doing, and to tie it to a strategy that would result in revitalizing a neighborhood. Yeah, but you got to be careful, because you really have to tiptoe around, you can't take public dollars and give it to private entities just for charitable purposes.
Well, this was my number one. I don't know who else's number one was in there. But, this is all part and parcel. We need to have a workshop, strategic discussion about the different layers that we have. We've got private entities out trying to get their hands on properties to flip. And then if we have, as a government, go and buy those, then we're sapping their efforts. We don't want to do that.
No,
So what is it? How can we facilitate more of what we want and do it in ways that are helpful? And that's a pretty tricky path, but there's a lot of things that need to happen on these layers are just screamers, and then how we can get into some encouraging things to make us more of a welcoming place to do business. And we've always been cautioned. Greg is too much on the ball to let us give away money. And but part of the issue we have here, we got people who own land and don't see what they're doing with their land as a problem.
right.
And they don't think it's an issue. But again, I'm talking about a specific that we can talk about in the workshop thing. So I believe that when we get through this, we're going to see that this is one of the priorities.
The Lexington Herald article about the housing, I just forwarded it all for y'all.
Thank you.
I found it was 2017, so.
What we probably will need to do is to identify a specific area, a specific need, a specific program, and then analyze and develop our revitalization effort once we have identified the area or the properties or the situation specifically that we need to address.
I'm not as familiar with TIF law, tax increment law in Kentucky as I am in Illinois. But when I worked for a community, I ran their redevelopment TIF district for housing specifically. And it covers everything you just described here, checking all his boxes from a legal standpoint of very specific, these are the problems this money should address. And it was actually a forgivable loan. We weren't giving loans, but we were loaning the money. And as long as they maintained and lived in that house based on the amount of money borrowed, at the end of that term, that money would be forgiven. And then we used that as the incentive to build up the TIF district, because then as they improved their houses, the increment went up, the taxes assessments went up, and then we were able to do that for more properties. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not as familiar with Kentucky TIF law, so that's where he comes into play. But what I heard here was exactly what I used to do there, or at least administer the program. But they came with very specific rules and very.
So what was the time frame it took to develop those kinds of programs?
For the TIF program, we hired
Was that 12-month period of time?
It took probably about a year to establish the boundaries, to go through the study that identified things. Illinois TIF law, you have to, it's called the but for this money, none of this development would happen. So it was, establishing that these properties are derelict, that investment will not occur in this area if someone doesn't kickstart it, the TIF. And once that happens, then you have to set up a very specific programming how you're going to administer the funds. And then the city just let it be known that, hey, here's the boundary, here's the program. If you have a project that fits this, come talk to us. So that was about a year it took to get that rolling. But then for money to be actually in the TIF, it took a couple years to build that. So you had more money. They put in money to begin with so that they had a pot to start, so that they had some increment. But that was one of their plans, and that was for residential, which is kind of rare in Illinois. Illinois doesn't like residential TIFs; they like commercial. But again, Illinois, not Kentucky, so not as helpful here, and I apologize. But I have a feeling some things has to be something similar.
The KLC is a good resource when you're starting to talk about TIFs. KLC is a good resource for.
Okay.
And it's going to be similar. It's going to be primarily commercial.
I think based on the amount of time we spent, I agree this is a top priority. Sometimes it's easy to tell priorities based on that. So I'm gonna do my own personal star on that one so that we know that that one should filter to the top. Next, infrastructure and property investment. Develop city-owned properties. The one that was starred, continue to improve and invest in the airport as a community asset. So any thoughts or discussion around that particular?
Doing our level best right now.
That's a very short term one.
Might be done.
But I like the workforce opportunities in aviation. If we could maybe, do some recruitment on that or something. When they came down here, they told us that there was going to be a big need for airplane mechanics and stuff. That would be one.
So working with
area.
like community colleges to
Yes.
bolster.
So we've achieved a great milestone and work will continue.
Yeah.
We've almost achieved a great milestone.
I'll
We're
put
near
on
the end of
the
that. Yeah, the gas, that's a big one.
that is.
But the FAA grant funding, I don't know. Haskins would have to tell me when we're gonna possibly get that turned back on. That's a big, but we've completed the work. That should be just fall in line with the time. And then, getting the fixed base operator to get them off of the dole is our, we wanted to divert city resources to get them off of the dole. So we've got a great, as we always do, we get a great board to sit on it and direct it. That seems to be going pretty well. And so we've reached this milestone of half gas, jet, and hangar for the waiting list. That's pretty impressive. So, moving forward, I guess the next one is to recruit that fixed base operator. And that's when you start going in on, what is that one? And so the aircraft occupation and stuff.
Yeah.
We've got, in the county, there is I love it. What is the youth organization for flying? What is that? Civil Air Patrol. So there's an active Civil Air Patrol here. And so, that coupled with the sustenance of the airport. And so we got a lot of good things going. It's going to take effort and support and sponsorship.
Mhm. Promote Calvert City as a recreational destination. Initiate the IMBA feasibility study and become a destination for bike riding mountain bikers. That got 1 star. And then down here, ensure efficiencies in public utilities, color coordinate fire hydrants to their pressure system. Would anybody like to speak on this?
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, we're not gonna do that anytime soon.
Okay.
A lot of your, you are starting to see that pop up all around. Fire hydrants be color coded to the flow and the pressures. We normally stay with the red fire hydrant. Silver top means there's a valve in front of it. It's just kind of our standard and it works real good for us. I do see where it would be beneficial out in low pressure areas because you would know that this is a low pressure fire hydrant. I do see where that'd be beneficial, but the fire department, most of the guys know where the low pressure is. And our system runs pretty stable, at certain pressure, and most fire hydrants are pretty stable.
Just to interrupt too, Timmy Davis was actually the one that added that. So just so you know.
I wonder how expensive that would be to do that.
We normally paint fire hydrants ourselves, and we paint them whenever they start looking bad. It's right now they still look good, so I'm not gonna paint them anytime soon. But that is starting to be the trend of painting fire hydrants.
If you implemented that, then as you painted them, you could paint them whatever color they were supposed to be.
Yeah, and we can. Right now there really is not a standard on.
Okay.
We're not. I don't have anybody telling me, hey, over the next 10 years you need to start changing them out. There is no standard to that. But I'm not opposed to it. We've always stuck with the red fire hydrants, and it's got a silver top on it. There's a valve in front of it, and it's always worked for us. But there are better ways to do things. So, I'm not opposed to it.
Hey, Blair, is that IMBA feasibility study, is that the different phases of the pump tracks located all around like the airport, and is that what that is?
Yes, it's behind here in Doctors Park, behind the elementary school. And
Yeah.
then along the trail, they had, features along the trail as well.
Okay. I mean,
And the airport.
I love that when that came around. We hadn't jumped back on that full force, but that's my start on that, because those dollar amounts for that didn't really blow me away either. And that'd be a pretty cool asset, especially with how popular and successful mountain biking is with our high school and all this other stuff. So
Does the high school have a team now?
a very high performing team.
I'd say it's becoming very popular.
Like we win state in Tennessee.
Because they don't have a state in Kentucky, do they?
Well, they do now.
Oh, they do now, but they didn't at the
So
time.
at one
you know, we can
time,
host this.
Blair could reach the computer and mess with it. But at one time, we were gonna have the Tennessee State Championship here in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And that fell through, I think, COVID time. I don't know if they're ever gonna develop or not.
They're going to be here in October of this year.
The state championship here.
It won't be Tennessee. It'll be Kentucky's. It'll be the Kentucky, the NICA, because we don't have to perform ride in Tennessee anymore, because now Kentucky has a NICA team, and Kentucky Dam Village, their bike trail out there has been officially NICA certified, which is like one of 3 or 4 trails in the state of Kentucky. And they're going to be here they're going to be here in October. They're filling all of our hotels. I mean, all of them. And they're going to be here all weekend. So that's good for hotels.
What was the leadership thing they had out there just recently?
That was the summit. That was training the locals here in the area to be NICA certified. Most of them had already been certified, but it was just kind of a nice conference for those that needed that training.
And that study was just so well done. The dollars weren't crazy, and me personally, I feel like that fits more of our brand right now. So that's why I rated that high.
We don't have a whole lot on at underground infrastructure. Are there other needs we need to address? Any sanitary, any storm, any fiber? It hasn't focused, but I just kind of realized that as I was sitting here, like we don't really have much on any of that type of infrastructure. Are there?
I think the reason we did this because our staff keeps a good eye on that, and they have, we have like a paving plan in place. We know have studies on the new water plant and sewer plant. They take really good care of us on that.
No, that's great.
All of our
I won't lie, it's unusual not to have a lot more infrastructure projects. So that's why I was like, wait, did I miss something? I panicked a little bit.
Sorry to interrupt again, but Silas and Brad are both on the call. So if there's something that does need to be added, now is the time to start thinking about that. Not to put you on the spot, Silas, sorry.
Well, something that really isn't on the plan, as you guys know, we've got a water treatment plant issue. We're in the middle of the discussion on how to shift our water board's emphasis around, and that's going to be a very high short-term priority. Our existing water treatment plants in the floodplain, we need to get it out. We've done about several years. It's wearing out. We've got Mayor Jones had spent some money on some engineering studies on figuring out a plan. It's something that's been moving forward. I think council supports. I think we will support it. But yet, when we go to a strategic plan, we assume that all is good. And so let's not get behind Mark because we've done such a great job. And so if we were not doing a great job, people were having issues that'd be much higher. So we're actually borderline to getting behind the 8 ball on that one. We are, you know, we're in danger of losing a proactive status if we don't address that water treatment plant. And, you know, we just got through with a lot of infrastructure on the sewer side of life.
My understanding on part of that was that the board had things ready, but Mayor Jones hadn't. It had gone no farther, but they had turned some information in, or they had asked for another committee.
Okay, I think I know where you're going. I want to make sure I understand. So they had looked at having a committee that was devoted to answering the unknown questions on a water treatment plant to get utility side of it going. Okay, so that for me, stepping in this role, that is one of the very short-term near priorities, and stepping out of probably what we need to be doing here with some of the grant funds that are coming as part of the infrastructure. The city's already slated to receive a significant amount of money as part of the Rescue America Act. This is over. We're talking $15 million. We're talking 10 to 15, and you've got to fill out the answers and figure out which way we're going to go on that. That's a substantial investment. And so there are grant monies there for rural water systems, of which we are. And so we will get some financial help from sometime, but the emphasis, boy, I wish we'd had that committee in place 3 months ago. So we would look, you know, we've learned what shovel ready is. Well, we need this water plant to be further along the trail. So there are some gaps and some unknowns that have to be addressed.
So we're gonna add to this at a later time.
I just didn't want it.
Well,
You know, it almost looks like that the water board hasn't been doing anything, and when they have, but somehow, right, in the illness or with COVID and everything else that was going on, evidently that information, Mayor Jones didn't do anything else with it, and that's my concern, that I just don't want it to look like they've not been doing anything when they have been, you know.
well, no, I think the fact that it's not up there at a very high mark is
Yeah.
test the fact that they have been doing stuff, and you know, we do have a good utility and things aren't problematic. But right now we're on the precipice of, even though here's the problem, is the strategic plan. We're going to put a lot of emphasis on it. And the city is essentially debt free except for our water system, and that's okay. I mean, it's a water system, and that happens. It's recognized that, you know, it's not cheap to run one of these things, but because we've been doing okay, our strategic plan won't be indicative of this should be an area of emphasis. But you take a look over where we're going to head as a city. I'm going to tell you where we're going to head as a city in the next 2 years. We're going to put some money into that issue, and it's going to have to be done. So we got a problem here. Not a problem, but how do you say, okay, strategic plan, and then here you're doing this, but it's not in there?
So you need to put water.
I'm
into a
going to put
treatment
it in here
plant.
only from my funding hat. I'm going to fill in I write a lot of grants. If you're telling me it's a need, but it's not in your strategic plan, is it really a need? I get where you're coming from, saying like, yeah, we've done all this, so it's moving forward, so it's not a priority, but I feel like you need to have it.
I think
in
maybe
just so when they say what supporting documents do you have, hey, look, it's in our strategic plan.
okay, because see, I think I was like, well, we already know we're going to do that, so I didn't put it in there.
110.
Yeah,
that's right. So we've got a $110,000 study that Strand Engineering did with the emphasis on, and they reviewed where we're at, water flow rates are, what our challenges are, what the age of the current plan is, and have multiple options for the softening options, and that's out there. I'm
just going to put implement current plan.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think that will. I think
Yes.
that will suffice.
And the reason it's not, you know, when you take I'll go ahead and say, 'cause I don't have another word around, but when you have the opinion poll of where we need to improve, you don't have that dire sense of consequences. It's been a well-run system. Like I said, the board's been doing what they need to be doing to keep things between the dishes, but the focus needs to go ahead and shift. You know, folks, if anybody, if we're ever going to get any money to help a small town achieve infrastructure projects, now's the time to get on it. And so we're going to push the button on that and accelerate quite a lot.
Any other public utilities we missed?
Well, there's something that it's not even a category for me, is Probably should have figured out how to get it added in there. It just, and Brad's at home listening. He's probably gonna be thumping me. I don't have a cattle prod on me yet for both. But when we pick up yard debris in the city, it goes to landfill. We used to burn it. And so, you know, there needs to be a regional composting effort. Calvert City shouldn't, we can't afford to do all the things that have to be done. And I know John's looked at it with Brad and other people. I don't know who all has looked at it, but it's a pretty stringent thing. You gotta have land that's not the floodplain. You can't have a pile of mulch and have the river get up and wash it into the floodway. So, you know, where would you put it? And then the regulations on such a composting facility is really crazy too. But again, that's one that we have our citizens put yard debris on the curb every other month and then disappears. Well, we need to get it to disappear in a more environmentally friendly nature. That's an opinion for me. Not really up there. I didn't know where to put that, but that's something that I would like to get a study going on how we could get some cooperative effort. You know, the county has the same problem. People will take stuff to the dump and they pile it, they push it in a pile and don't match on it. So, you know, how we move forward with some kind of cooperative effort between governments to come up with some way to compost it. And the problem with that is you got to haul it there.
Yeah.
And so that increased our cost. And so that's you know, the sustainability side of life, you know, the gardens and the butterfly stuff and things, and we aren't even doing some of the basic blocking and tapping it. And you know, we've got the trailers for recycling for our citizens who are interested in recycling, and that's a constant issue on keeping that supply chain going, keeping that movement going. And so, you know, bringing up the recycling streams and the yard waste and stuff are out there. We hadn't really identified them prior, and you couldn't. I don't think most people think of that as needed infrastructure. This is probably the wrong category most people find to talk about those things. But it's where we're going as a culture and as a nation. We need to be able to do those. And so we pick up trash routes twice a week now, and then we turn around and our ability to run a composting facility and get recyclables into the right streams, and we're picking up some momentum of that. I mean, every trade journal you pick up, and here recently it seems like the momentum acceleration toward recycling and actually closing the loop of sustainability. I saw a great presentation at the CAT last night from Markham. Great, right? Yeah, Greg did that. So that's just something that hit me.
I have a question. It's kind of jumping back from where we were before on housing. It says, ask her about the housing handbook.
This is an idea I came up with, but it was from watching HGTV, your Chip and Joanna games, and just looking at, you know, they're taking these houses and they're fixing them up. Well, a lot of what they're doing is very boilerplate. I was like, well, you've got a lot of housing stuff that's pretty much cookie cutter. This was the house we built. We replicate it, we replicate it, we replicate it. 40 houses later, you have the same house. Maybe the kitchen's on this side here or on that side there, but I mean, it's essentially a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, kitchen, living room, rectangle on a slab type house or whatever. And so I was like, well, if we know your current zoning ordinances and you work with maybe an architect and a realtor and, you know, some interior designer even, and look at the houses and say, hey, here's how you can add on to this house. Here's how you can make a second bathroom. Here's the floor plan with low grade materials. This type typically costs X amount of dollars. So with the investment of buying the house for $90,000 plus the $30,000 it's going to take to get this floor plan, here's what you can do. And then you have an upgraded house. You've solved some of your housing issues, but it's just looking at the standard type houses you have, where additions could be made based on typical lot size and your allowed setbacks and whatnot. And here's the processes to follow to get your dream house. So you're not only buying a house, but you're getting it with the finishes you want, the space you want, and the layout you want. You know, it's handing that to a realtor and saying, okay, now sell our lower end housing because it can now be higher end housing, or even middle ground housing. Or middle ground housing moved up to higher end. You know, you can replicate that. And so that was the idea behind the playbook.
So like, how would you fund that? How much do you think that would be?
I would say,
honestly, I really like the idea because in the 1950s, they are like,
Sears and Roebuck, yeah.
well, it was like they built for the plants coming in here, and the houses are cookie cutter pretty much, and they're designed with very small bedrooms because back then that wasn't a thing, and most of them only have 1 bath. And people now want at least 2 baths and big bedrooms and stuff. So, I mean, to me, in a lot of ways, that's a fit for us.
Right. So honestly, if I were you to fund it a little more easily, I mean, you have a great extension resource. I'm sure one of the universities has an architecture program, an interior design program, someone that's, you know, a student that's looking for a senior thesis project. I mean, this would be a great class project, but here are the different types of houses. Let groups come up with ways to upgrade these lots, upgrade these units, you know, based on some of the standards. Sign on with a professional, sign on with, you know, someone that's looking. I mean, all our professional organizations do have, like, you know, we're supposed to volunteer, we're supposed to give back to the profession. So that would be a perfect project for that type of.
I like it too.
It's just, but it's the HGTV
But I
model,
like it.
HGTV model, but scaled down to something that helps a need.
But it's
in your community.
definitely, we have a problem with the type housing that we have, what we call Calvert Heights for the most part. And not, a lot of people don't have the vision of what it could be. And if you had somebody to help them with that, then we might be able to sell more and get them upgraded at the same time.
That's, and the point behind that too is some of the graphics today. So I'm a
Right.
visual person. I can look at this room and I go, here's what we could do. I think this would look great. Here we go. I talked to my husband when we were building our house and he was like, I don't see it.
Right.
And so I got out SketchUp and I built it up and I was like, and with these colors, and he's like, oh, I see it now. I was like, oh no, you literally see it because I built it for you.
Yeah.
So yes, you do see it, but I think some people walk into a house, and I remember when we were buying a house, we'd walk in and be like, I don't like this house. I don't like the paint colors. I was like, well, we can change paint, first of all. And secondly, it's exactly like the house you liked down the street. It's just these people decorated differently than those people, but it's the exact same layout. Just a slightly different view in the backyard. But I think this is, some people do have that. Some people have vision, some don't. And I think creating a playbook provides that vision. Like, this house is too small. It's nice on the budget, but we could spend more and get what we want.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you spend that more here? And this is what, and you own a little piece of it. It's designed a little bit by you. I think that's, for some people, that plays would for me personally. You can put my own touch, not just what someone else thought looked good. So that was the housing playbook. I know it is 7 o'clock. So real quick, housing needs. I post a workshop on housing. I feel like that should be.
I have no idea what that was.
It's telling me to stop talking. That was my cue. I like the Oscars.
I really like that host a workshop with developers, realtors, staff, and council.
Mhm.
And, you know, that would go with housing and with zoning,
Yeah, I think it is a priority for you guys. We've talked about it quite a bit, and so I think it goes part and parcel with dilapidated properties, with some of the other, inviting younger generations. And most people in their 60s retiring are going to want to take on a home renovation project, but a younger couple starting out, they're more willing to and have the energy to do it probably a little bit more than others. So I feel like it hits a couple of those boxes. The only last thing we had here was position Calvert City as an authentic place to stay and visit in the region. And I got stars all across, but the biggest one would be look for and develop incentives to attract business. And I think that could be a workshop in itself as well. In all honesty.
You could put restaurants, so business at all.
Yeah.
But
That's what all those
how do you
studies.
We want a
say-
steakhouse.
Yeah, how do you build around it, and then hopefully it comes with.
I think some of the things, like if you start hosting more tournaments for, say, the biking, and people are staying in the hotels are more full, more consistently, that's something you can tout to restaurateurs, like, hey, our hotels are booked at capacity, 3 weekends of the month. Like, these people need a place to eat. I think you can.
Yeah.
It's a chain that follows. And so I think you hone in on one or two of these, and I think the others start to really fall into place, or at least you have the argument to present when looking for that. So.
We hear that a lot. And we're a town of 2,500. And for a town of 2,500, you got some very fine places that are locally owned
Right.
and a lot of choices. We don't have some other types of things, but
Is Chipotle high on the list? I feel like every town I go to, they're like, we want a Chipotle.
It's usually something like Logan's or Longhorn or Applebee's or something, they can go and get a steak or something like that, but I'm like, gee, in this size town, we have a lot of places.
but you know, the retail recruitment is one of the things that's.
But if the tourism's there, that should come also.
Yeah.
We can give tax breaks and other help, but you can't force the market will come to you.
Aren't we already involved in retail strategies, and aren't they working with us to help us do that, Fred, to work toward that recruitment?
They're a good one.
Well, I think, again, it's like we have to get people here to seek help. And that's, when they see it, they like it. I mean, and
It's a beautiful community, I will say. It's impressive driving in.
we just can't get them to drive it. They go
Right.
states up next where, but I think the biking is gonna go a long way with that. When you have those things, but we have fishing tournaments where, if you had a registration, say at Jenna Marina, they go no farther than Jenna Marina. They don't, people wouldn't even know there was a grocery store here.
I bet people will be shocked at how many people identify Calvert City as the home of Jenna Marine.
Right.
I mean, I think if you were to talk to our residents, we had a good number for that. Our residents would be stunned about how much of an impact that bona fide ranger dealer with real inventory
Right.
means to some
Right.
people. How
Right.
far people are driving in to go to Jenna Marine.
Yeah.
I think we'd be.
I don't
stunned.
appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
That's my-
Definitely. A lot of people say,
I
yeah,
think
that's
you
where.
would really be surprised. I mean, literally, it's, it's.
I know people drive up far away for custom automotive.
So you need
Yeah,
a,
there's another one, yeah.
so you need like a visitor's kiosk there that shows all the others.
Well, and Blair's done a lot, I mean, to help us and to be noticed and stuff, and, I just noticed she started the Friday, food truck Fridays, and now every community around has food trucks, and nobody had it when Blair did it, so.
Yeah, well,
She's
people
a
don't mind selling
trendsetter.
from Calvert City. They don't get nailed. They don't know who they stole it from.
Right, yeah, nowhere near that.
But you don't get to Calvert City by accident.
No, you
Because
really
there's not a
don't.
bridge across the river. You got that river behind us, the north of us. You don't wander through here like a county seat in Kentucky.
Right.
You either go across the bridge at Kentucky Dam or you go on toward Ledbetter to get across that obstacle. And you don't come to Calvert City by accident.
And I think one of the underutilized things are maybe an Airbnb.
Right by
Yeah.
62.
My nephew and his wife, the Rock House was right down past the Civic Center, and they opened that up like during COVID after they got it done as on Airbnb. I mean, it's just I don't know how you say it, but they don't have breakfast. They just got, the place there to stay and stuff. And they have had somebody there just almost every week since they've done it. But Nathan Brandon did the video of them that showed Calvert and the parks and stuff like that. And people see the parks and where that house is located, and there could be others, is what I'm trying to say. But where that's located, they come because one of them, we have small children, we can take them up to the park. And sooner or later, somebody's gonna come stay and really like it enough that they might move here. I mean, that's where I think that maybe we're missing out on that part of it, where you might not get that from a motel.
So you also hit on a point though too, that I think a lot of communities are realizing. COVID helped people realize that there's a certain demographic of people that don't have to have an office. You can work literally from anywhere, which means you can live anywhere you want. You don't have
That's where
to.
you get into that high-speed internet stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. So also, it shouldn't be an entire focus, but I do think that to your point, like if you like a place, you no longer have to be tied to it because your employer's there.
Right.
Or you have to find employment there. You can hit a whole new market of work from home because you have the bike systems you like, because you work from home and you can take your lunch and do a bike ride.
Right.
It's a whole different realm, and we're moving more towards service and this work from home.
Right.
I think you could fit a really, really unique niche there.
I know some people who do a round of disc golf every day at lunch. And it's a very easy thing to do. Working from home, grab a sandwich and do a 9-hole disc golf, go back to home, get back home to Zoom.
Yeah,
Pretty cool.
it's not for everyone, but
No, but it is, I mean, it has changed things for sure.
I don't want to keep you much past 7. It looks like the rain has stopped too. We timed that one. At the burst of the storm right in the middle there. So, any other final thoughts or anything? Basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the notes here. I'll probably rewatch this video several times to make sure I didn't miss anything. But sometimes while I'm taking notes, my brain is one place, even though my ears are hearing other things. And put this into a plan for you to review. I'm gonna try to get that done the next month so that you can review it, take some time with it. We can do some back and forth then too. And then it'll be yours for adoption and implementation. But if you have final thoughts after this, feel free to email me. I was on that email chain, Stephanie Brown, S. Brown at Chastain Engineers. So definitely reach out. Do not hesitate.
We can call Rebecca too, right?
You can call Rebecca too. She'll be glad to help you.
Claire, do you hear
I'm
that?
sorry.
I know she knows my name. It's fine.
And we tossed around trying to partner with an architectural school for residential before. I love that.
I don't know that we have.
We talked about that here before.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm sold.
For the housing playbook.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And if you know your zoning ordinances, I mean, if you're proposing additions, you can show someone what they can do and meet the zoning requirements. Like this maintains your 5-foot side yard or your 20-foot front yard. This adds a porch, so you have that curb appeal.
Right. Yeah.
All those things. You can even do like this old Sears Roebuck, where it's like you can, if you add on this porch, that's an additional $5,000, and you can just like, okay, well, I don't want to put that porch on right now. And if you do this, that tends to add $10,000. Oh well, yeah, I think I'm willing. I think that is a good use of those money. Similar to the Chip and Joanna, we have $50,000 left in the budget. Here are your 3 options.
And
Have an architectural program.
even
Isn't that the building that's,
even
I think they do, but I also think that next to PCC or.
part of the working.
That's the engineering group.
Yeah, that's UK. They don't have one.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
University of Kentucky does. Maybe West.
I'll check with West.
That's what I'm saying.
A lot of different.
I don't
It's basically
think-
taking a footprint and saying, okay, well, here's basically where your water is. The least expensive is to keep the water there. How do we work around that? Where can we move walls? Where can we, in a lot of the smaller houses, there's no load bearing in the middle. Most of them are little exterior walls of the load bearing. They're not that wide, so. But it also avoids those things too. If you've identified in these houses, this is typically where the load bearing wall is. You can avoid those costly amateur renovation mistakes or.
Well, see, now that's, we've got
And then
a
you.
decent amount of
your
people,
small
John probably
Businesses.
bumps into them, knows them from questions on zoning, who are into renovation of properties around here. I've seen more of that. Jeremy mentioned it earlier.
Well, they are in some places.
And you get into outright flipping, and you got access to Home Depot, Lowe's, doesn't mean you have the skills necessarily. And so you can, you have to, if you can help that out to be a more professional job, then that helps your housing stock too.
And I think the thing too, that on TV and stuff, that, if you flip a house, you're probably not gonna be making $20,000-$30,000 profit on that. You know what I'm trying to say is, they blow it up like you're gonna make a lot. You may have to flip a house around
Well,
here. You
with
may not make
interest,
that.
with interest rates what they are now, and the interest in that, in pop culture, if you will.
Yeah.
We've got more of that
I
going
wish I knew
on.
how to do that.
We got more of that going on here than I can recall in the past.
Right now, it's a seller's market.
Absolutely.
I mean, house prices are going up and the sale, the amount of time it's on the market is going down. It also helps that the interest rates are as low as they are at this point. So nobody's wanting to build because of the cost of lumber, so they're wanting to buy. And so, yeah, if somebody wants to flip, this is a market rich environment right now.
But we got people doing multiples in the community. Some of us know who they are, and and that helps, right? So,
Yeah.
And the other thing you might want to look at too, and this is just my brain now, it's firing on all some cylinders with this one. But if you have a dilapidated house next to one that's worth saving, to condemn that one, get the lot and allow that person to have a larger lot and more area to develop.
See, and that's a problem too here, is that the lots aren't that big, as big as some people might want now, and if you, that would be a great thing if you had that.
For those that are
I don't think
beyond.
we have very many of that, of that situation, but yeah, it would be great.
I mean, I think it's, the fact that people are flipping and investing in communities is a signal that we're doing a good job and that people
Right.
want to be here. I mean, we can't always drive everything. We can't always be the one to get the loan and do this, that. We can have some cool programs, but the fact that private individuals are doing it, to me, is a sign that they think
They're flipping them and selling them. It's
they
when
think
they were
they're
flipping them,
worth-
or when they were fixing them up and renting them, that's when I think sometimes
Yeah.
that hurts us, but.
One of the things that I was talking to someone earlier today about, in fact, is that the fact that people, even the people that live here, reinvest or invest in this community. A lot of smaller communities don't have that because of the negativism that goes with it, that there's just no future for that community, so they won't invest in it. That is not the case in Calvert.
you wouldn't go flip a house in Cairo, but you would flip one here. I mean,
I know several communities in Kentucky that way too. Yeah, that's exactly,
No,
you're right.
No,
But
but
yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. Yeah, because of the way they're perceived by the people that live there, they won't invest in that community.
Well,
Calvert City still invests in its community, and that's a very big plus for this
that's
community,
like
I
a
think.
leading indicator for us, like, okay.
Yes, sir.
people are doing
Yes, sir.
well, that's a continuum too. I mean, you go up, I get sick of hearing, I've got a son lives in St. Matthews, and in areas that if you walk areas in St. Matthews that have just, of course, they're near the city. It's a different economic situation. And their housing stock has probably some of the areas that are higher dollar don't have as good a bones as say Calvert Heights did. And so how do you have the jobs? How do you have the economic structure that people want to be there and are willing to do that with your properties? And so we won't be in that end perspective as say a St. Matthews area. But we certainly don't want to be at the other end of the spectrum either. So what can we do to get more of that type of action? And the number of rentals in the city and the housing stock. I mean, we could have multiple workshops on property, understanding where we're at on property, understanding and developing strategies to improve where we're at.
The housing starts here are, in the last 5 years, we've had more housing starts than we had in the previous 12 years together.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just, the housing starts here are actually more than they used to be. In just the time that I've been here. And a lot of them have happened in 3 areas. And one more than the other two, but the subdivisions that we have are, one of them is actually growing in leaps and bounds. The other two have had some movement, but not near what this last one has had. And it has really done a fine job. And we're starting another one as we speak. They're going to start another one just any day. And one's under construction right now. And so, and one is in the process of getting everything together to be constructed. So, I'm not saying we've got the answer to it here, but I will tell you that there's some positives in the future. So.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank you.
I didn't want to cut you off. Like if you're, I'm here as long as you are.
I'm gonna wait for the adjourn. I don't want to speak about it.
Thank you. Like I said, I'll get this going for you. And then I'll try to synthesize and probably rearrange a little bit just based on how we talked about it. This was how it was set up in the previous plan. So I tried not to stray too far just because I wanted for consistency, but I feel like it needs restructured as things I think could go in different places. But I'll get that for you.
Thank you very much.
This is fun.
Well, we get excited. I mean, we just said it for a long time. And I think we do need to try to set aside time to get after the situational properties and the different layers. There's different layers. It's a big deal. And there's things that we can do in the budget. Actually, still have time to do in the budget that would help us put our money where our mouth is on that. Okay. Blair, have you got something to add to the end of the strategic workshop?
Good night.
Okay, before we actually go, I do want to share some sanity. Lowell O'Daniel passed away. I don't know the details. He did pass away. And I think it was today. I got the information today. So I don't have any plans. Lowell lived and breathed the fire department for a lot of years. He was involved in a lot of community activities and different things that I'm sure I'm not even aware of. I'm looking forward to learning more about that. But he was a dandy for that. So
Thank you for that.
our hearts go out to the family. Chief Davis has been over and talking to Martha. I think not actually, but some of the family and however we honor the fire department. So I don't know what the time frame is for final range. That's certain. I don't know. I don't know what. I mean, I'd be.
I'm saying he's close to 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to pass on
What's
that
that?
same news at the end, the strategic workshop. So, okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second, okay, we're adjourned. Where's my hand?
Good.
Break the hand. There's one up there.